Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out an updated Stamina Nightblade solo PVE build. That's right, back on the solo Stam Nightblade for the Scalebreaker DLC. I'm calling this the Spectral Warrior. And that's because we have a pretty interesting combination, I think, of skills and sets that both gives a kind of RP flavor, as well as having a really strong build with a lot of survivability, sustain, and damage. So if you're looking for a Stam Nightblade setup that can easily solo world bosses and dungeons, then this is the build for you. As usual, we'll go over the stats, the gear sets, the skills, champion points, and more coming up next. Alright, here we are back on the Stamina Nightblade solo build. Just a couple of things to keep in mind before we get started. Number one, this is from the Scalebreaker DLC, which means some of this might be changing next patch. I don't exactly know for sure, but I've tried to make this build with a good combination of dots and single target damage, so you should be okay no matter which way the meta goes on this build. Also keep in mind that this is a purely solo build, and it's not maximized for like group DPS, trial DPS, things like that. The focus of these builds is, as usual, being able to solo your way through a dungeon, take on world bosses, that type of thing. So just keep that in mind as we check out the stats. To start with, about 12k max magicka, 21k health, 33k stamina, 1100 stam recovery, and 800 magicka recovery here. Now you can improve your stamina recovery if you are a different race. I am a Khajiit right now, and I do think that Wood Elf is going to be slightly better for this kind of build. But also keep in mind that we do have a couple of item sets as well as skills that are boosting our recovery that you don't see on the stat sheet. So actually we're closer to about 2k stamina recovery on the build, which we will talk about when we get there. 3,500 weapon damage, that does go up over 4k when we have our Berserker Glyph procced. 45% weapon critical right now, that does go over about 50% with some of our passives. And then for our physical and spell resistance, we are in medium armor, but we do get the defensive buffs from our shadow abilities, so sitting at about 17k spell and physical. Keep in mind that we do have a lot of defensive skills that we'll talk about. We also have access to things like minor maim, so we have about 25% damage reduction on the build that we're getting from our skills. So even on a medium armor build, it feels quite tanky, and you can survive a lot on this setup. Now, I do have all my points into stamina here. I'm using the Thief Mundus for that extra bit of crit. It'll get you about 50% crit. I think that's the way to go on this build. Now, you can also run the Serpent if you feel like you need more sustain. Stage 4 Vampire, that's just what I happen to have on this character. It's not required, but I do like the extra magicka and stamina recovery on this build. We also get the Undeath passive that makes us a little bit tankier when our health is low, so definitely good to have. I'm using the blue food on this build, and that's because we have so much recovery built in through our skills and sets that I felt like I could just do blue food on this, and it works really well. You can also obviously run Dubious, or even Artaeum Takeaway Broth, depending on how you feel your sustain is on the build. For our potion, you actually can run just the basic trash stamina potions on this build. I set it up so that you have both your major crit and major weapon damage bonus from your skills, so it's very easy just to sustain this with regular potions. And then last but not least, for the race, I mentioned it earlier, I think probably Wood Elf is going to be your best bet for this particular kind of solo build. It's because they have the extra stamina as well as stam recovery. Another good choice also would be Orc, because Orcs get the nice juicy weapon damage buff, plus that extra health is going to be also very good for soloing. I'm a Khajiit right now, which is okay. You have a little bit of extra recoveries, a little bit of extra stats, and then the crit damage is nice. But like I said, probably my top two for solo Stam Nightblade is going to be either Wood Elf or Orc. So I think that covers the basics. Let's go ahead and jump into the sets next. Starting off with our first 5-piece set, I went with the Hunt Leader set. And I wanted to do something that was going to be really good on this build for sustain, and I think this is probably one of the best sustain sets you can get. This gives you max stam, weapon damage. Then for the 5-piece here, when your pets attack an enemy you've attacked, you heal for about 2,500 health and restore 1,200 stamina. That happens every 5 seconds. So you may be thinking, well, what's your pet? You're a Nightblade. Well, the shadow image skill of the Nightblade actually counts as a pet for this item set. So as long as you are using your shade, which you should be, because it also gives you minor maim and it gives you the shadow passes, which are all really, really good for soloing. You'll also get some really good healing and sustain from this Hunt Leader set. This comes from Maelstrom Arena. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to run veteran mode to get this. You can just pick it up on normal, and you can literally pick up any pieces you want. You can run a mix of body pieces and jewelry. I just am using the first 5 pieces that I picked up, which I believe is the belt, legs, feet, and then a couple of jewelry pieces here. I don't have the best traits. What's interesting about this too, though, is it actually comes in stamina and magicka jewelry, as well as health. So you can kind of get extra health or magicka, which is not bad, I would say, for soloing. But overall, I do really like this set on the Stamina Nightblade. Just again, for that healing and sustain. I'm going to be running Shadow Image on this build, so I think it's a really good combination. Now for our other 5-piece set, I've got my sustain, so I just wanted to run something with good damage, and that's just going to be a very easy set. That's Spriggans. So Spriggans gives us a more max stamina, 2 stamina bonuses here, weapon damage, so basically the same bonuses as the Hunt set, but it gives us that nice physical penetration bonus on the 5-piece, making all of our skills do more damage. I do recommend putting this on your weapons because it's going to be much easier to get these. You can either go through treasure chests, world bosses, or you can pick this up on guild traders. It's going to be easier to get the Spriggans weapons than it will be to get the Hunt Leader weapons. Now for your front bar, you do want a 2-hander. Doesn't make a huge difference, but I prefer the Maul. That's because we get some extra bonus penetration from our 2-handed passives. I've got an Absorb Stamina enchant here on the front bar. That's just to help a little bit with my Khajiit sustain. If I was a Wood Elf, then I probably would run something else as the glyph here. Nirnhound on the tray is nice though, because that gives me extra weapon damage. For the back bar, I'm just running the Infused Bow, Infused Spriggan's Bow. You do want Infused for that extra 450 weapon damage every 5 seconds. You can have that procced up 100% of the time on your build. So that's 2 pieces for the weapons, and then the other 3 pieces you can make up wherever you need to. I think I'm running it on the chest here, and a couple of jewelry pieces. So last but not least, let's talk about the monster set. You have a lot of options here for the Stam Nightblade solo build. I was trying to solo some more difficult content, and so I went with something a little bit unusual for a stamina build. I'm using Ice Heart right now, and that's purely for the damage shield that this gives us. It gives about a 10k damage shield for 6 seconds. This procs pretty much on cooldown because we have a lot of crit on the Stam Nightblade. So this is a very good defensive monster set. So if you're trying to take on maybe veteran dungeons or a little bit harder world bosses, maybe in some of the DLC areas, definitely think about picking this up because it's going to be best in slot for soloing. Doesn't matter if you're a stamina or a magicka class. Now the other option here, which is nice just for regular dungeons, is you can pick up 1 piece of Krogs. This gives you a nice bonus to physical penetration, and then just another shoulder piece with weapon damage. So I run something like Molokina for that, for the extra weapon damage bonus. So that would be kind of my 2 setups. Again, Ice Heart for the damage shield if you're running more difficult content, and then if not, you want just something basic, you can just do 2 separate 1-piece bonuses. I like Krogs and Molokina for that. Now, in terms of traits and weights, what you want is you want as much Divines as possible, especially if you're running the Thief or the Serpent Mundus. That's going to give you more weapon critical or more recovery, whatever you happen to be using for that. So Divines is going to be your best in slot on a solo build. You do want majority of max stamina as your enchantment. You can pick up a couple of extra health enchantments depending on your race. So for example, on my Khajiit, I don't have a lot of health, so I actually did use 1 max health enchant on my chest piece. That's just to get me over 20k health. That's kind of where you want to be on a solo build. You don't want to be too far under 20k because otherwise you can't take very much damage and survive. Now you are going to be running at least 5 medium pieces on your body. That's the chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet, since those 2 sets do only come in medium. But when it comes to the head and shoulders, you can choose different weights there. If you have your Undaunted passives, which I don't even have on this character yet, you can run a heavy helmet and a light shoulder, and you'll get the maximum resource bonuses you can get from those passives. Now you can also run 1 medium shoulder and 1 heavy helmet. The heavy helmet is nice because you get some extra health, you get some extra passive defenses, health recovery. The heavy armor passives are pretty good for soloing. So up to you on that. It probably will depend also on what drops you get for your monster set and stuff like that. So let's move on to the skills that make it work. Starting on our front bar, this is our 2-hander. We've got Reverse Slice as our execute. And I prefer this over Killer's Blade because of the splash damage, because of the AoE here. You can see other enemies take 78% of the damage that you inflict the primary target with. So this is very good for splash damage. It's good for AoE. It's good for clearing through dungeons and trash packs and things like that. I just think the utility is so good on this execute that I just want to use it because it's good in most cases. For a purely single target fight, yeah, you could run Killer's Blade or Executioner and do a little bit more damage. But since I can't switch very easily, I'm going to use this because it's good in the majority of cases. Now next up, we also have Brawler, and Brawler is going to be for a damage shield. This gives us a good, solid damage shield that actually increases based on how many enemies we hit with the skill. So if you hit 1, you'll get about 5k damage shield, but the more enemies you hit, the larger that gets. Now this combined with your Ice Heart Helm, if you happen to be using that, that's going to give you more damage shield than you actually have health. So it's really good for helping you survive those big, heavy attacks from bosses or just a bunch of enemies that are all jumping on you at once. You definitely want this skill. This is the staple skill of any stamina solo build right now in ESO is Brawler. Next is kind of a flex spot. I'm running Camouflage Hunter right here. This skill is pretty interesting. It's changed a little bit. It has always given you Major Savagery, which is good. So that's our weapon crit bonus. This means I can just run basic cheap potions and I don't have to worry about my weapon crit being too low because it's going to give me that buff passively. So I really like that. Now I also really like the Minor Berserk. It used to be that Stamina Nightblades had Minor Berserk just passively from one of their skills. You didn't have to worry about this so much. But then that was removed from the class completely. And now we want to try to replace it somehow. So this skill actually gives us Minor Berserk for 5 seconds when we do critical damage from the side, either the side or from behind the enemy. So keep that in mind. I think this really goes well with like the flavor and the theme of the build. As a Stamina Nightblade, you're kind of this stealthy character and you can be moving around behind an enemy to their side, get a crit in against them, and then you get that Minor Berserk for 5 seconds, which increases all of your damage by 8%. So it's cool. I do like this a lot on the build. So then next up is going to be our main DPS skill. That's going to be Surprise Attacks. It's going to do a good amount of physical damage, and also we reduce their physical resistance for 10 seconds. Again, if we attack them from the side or behind. So this goes perfectly with running Camo Hunter as well on the front bar. Now it's not mentioned here on the tooltip, but this is a way to proc your shadow passives. You get things like extra health just for having this slotted, but you also get your Major Ward and Major Resolve, which is basically your main armor buffs, by using this ability. So you kind of have to use this. This is going to proc that armor for like 6 or 7 seconds, but you'll be using it much more than that, obviously. This is going to be your main spammable attack for the build. But again, you're getting a lot more than just that. You're getting a lot of passive support at the same time. So last up, we got Rally. This is going to be our source of Major Brutality, which we talked about earlier. That's that 20% weapon damage. We also get Minor Endurance to this patch, which is an extra 10% stamina recovery. And then finally, we get that nice burst heal whenever we cast the ability again. So this is going to be the only burst heal that we have on the build. Talked about with the sets, with the Hunt Leader set, we have a lot of passive health coming in. We also have passive health from one of our other abilities on the back bar. So overall, like our health per second is pretty good. It's pretty strong on the Stam Nightblade. But there are those cases where you'll take a big, giant boss heavy attack and you'll need a burst heal just to get your health back up. that's where you want Rally. And then last but not least, I'm going with something a little bit different for the ultimate here. I'm not using the stamina physical version in Cap Strike. I'm actually using Soul Harvest on this build. And again, that's to really help with trash pulls. When you're working through dungeons, Soul Harvest is amazing, you guys. I don't care that it does magic damage because I'm really just using it for the passive, which is anytime I kill an enemy, I get 10 ultimate. So think about it. If you kill a room of 10 mobs, you have 100 ultimate back already. This plus some of the passives that we get, the Nightblade is just an ultimate generating machine. So this is really good on the front bar for helping us pump out ultimate, which is going to give us more DPS from our back bar, which we'll get to in a second. Yes, you can run in cap if you want. I don't think it's as good, honestly, which is a little bit sad. I think the extra utility of this, especially when soloing, is much, much better. Now switching to our bow bar, on the back bar, we're running Barb Trap. This is a really good dot right now. You can see it's almost 30k damage unbuffed tooltip right now. It also is giving us that minor force buff, so we've got good crit already. Now we're doing 10% extra crit damage. We also have bonus crit damage as a Nightblade, so this is just a no-brainer, I think, on a Stam Nightblade. Now, we'll probably be reduced in the Dragonhold DLC. It's probably not going to do as much damage next patch, but I will probably still use it regardless, and that's just, again, because Minor Force is a really good buff. Next up, Endless Hail does good AoE damage over time. Again, this is one of those skills that possibly might be changing for Dragonhold, but again, I will probably still use this regardless because Endless Hail is not just about the damage, it's about the weapon enchant. And when we went over the gear, I talked about that Berserker enchant back bar. The Infused Berserker gives us fully buffed, probably 500, 550 weapon damage every 5 seconds. It's really good. So even if they increase the cost of this, I'm still going to use it just to get that massive, massive weapon damage buff every 5 seconds. Next up is Dark Shade, and this is really the key to making this build work. It does minimal damage. I think this might even be reduced in a future patch. I really don't care about the damage. What I care about is, first of all, the minor maim is amazing. This is one of the best buffs, actually debuffs, you can get when you're soloing in ESO because this reduces your enemy's damage by 15%. The Shade Morph also does this in an AoE. So you can get AoE minor maim when you're fighting a big group of enemies. They won't hit you as hard, and you'll be able to survive a lot easier. But not only that, we talked about it in the item sets. This is proccing Hunt Leader, which is giving us that juicy heal and stamina return. Plus, it's just a cool ability. I think it goes well with like this spectral warrior Nightblade theme. I think it's just a cool skill, and I really do like it on this particular build. Next up, Leeching Strikes. This is going to be another sustain tool that we have. We get really good healing back on our light and heavy attacks. You can see there 1500 health every time you light or heavy attack, plus a little bit of stamina, and then the stamina restore. The big burst of stamina happens when the effect ends. So basically, the longer you have it going, the more stamina you get back, up to about 4200 stamina over 20 seconds. Next up, we got Relentless Focus. Talked about this a little bit. It used to give Minor Berserk, it used to be better, but it is completely redesigned now, and it's actually very good for soloing in ESO. I also run this on my Magicka Nightblade solo build, and it's, again, not so much for the damage, although you can get a nice burst of damage if you use this consistently for DPS. If you put that into your rotation, it's great for damage. You still want to pick this up because of the damage reduction. You can see there in the tooltip, it reduces your damage taken by 2% for every light and heavy attack up to 5 times. So do the math, 2% times 5 times, that's a 10% damage reduction. We've also got damage reduction from Shade. That's an extra 15% damage reduction. So even though you're playing in 5, 6, 7 pieces of medium armor, this feels like a heavy armor build. You really have strong defenses on this build because of those 2 abilities. The interesting thing about this too is if you don't use it, if you don't consume the 5 stacks, they just stay. They stay on your character while you're in combat. So you can press this one time at the beginning of the fight, get your 5 stacks, don't consume the Spectral Bow, and just keep it, and you'll have permanent 10% damage reduction while you're in the fight. So If you're a newer player, that's a quick tip for you. Just build up your stacks, keep them on you, and then that really increases your defense for the whole fight. Last up is our ultimate. I just want something with some good physical damage on it because I am generating a lot of ultimate through Soul Harvest on the front bar. So 175 ultimate seems like a lot, but I'm getting so much ultimate back, even through some of the Nightblade passives, that this is up pretty often, and it's doing good damage. So I definitely recommend Ballista for your back bar ultimate. It's probably the most damage you're going to get. You can run more utility ultimates, like Soul Tether is pretty good if you're just clearing your way through a dungeon and you want more AoE, like stun and utility and healing. Soul Tether is a very good option too. Even Consuming Darkness, I played around a little bit because you get major protection from this, but it is a little bit expensive. But in general, just for doing the most damage possible, I'm going to be using Ballista there. So then let's review our passives really quick. On the Nightblade, passives are super important, you guys. Make sure you are picking up the right ones here. In the Assassination skill line, you'll want to pick up most of these. Now, if you are sneaking through a dungeon, this is going to be helpful. Master Assassin lets you do more damage while sneaking or invisible. Executioner, we're not using too much. This would go with Killer's Blade if you were using Killer's Blade as your execute. So you can save a couple of skill points on this build if you want by skipping this one. The pressure points you definitely want. You get extra weapon critical for each assassination ability slotted. Then the best passive here is Hemorrhage. You increase your critical damage by 10%, but that's with one of these abilities slotted. So you want to make sure you have both one ability on your front bar and one ability on your back bar. So the way that we're using it on this build is front bar, I do have my ultimate. That counts for one of those. And then back bar, I do have Relentless Focus. That counts for my back bar assassination skill. I'll just keep that in mind. You also get passive weapon crit. It's about 5-6% on this build through the Hemorrhage passive when you do critical damage. Under Shadow, most of these are pretty important as well. Refreshing Shadows is an excellent passive. Gives you health, stamina, and magicka recovery increased by 15%. Definitely pick that one up. That one is good. Shadow Barrier, we talked about this. We're going to be proccing this off of our surprise attack for the most part, and that's going to give us about 50 to 80 physical and spell resistance for about 7 seconds. This depends on how many heavy pieces you are wearing, though. Dark Vigor does get you bonus health for having a shadow ability slotted. This is another reason why I set up my bars the way I did, because I like having the same health on the front bar and the back bar. So I've got one shadow ability on the front bar, and I've got Dark Shade on the back bar. That way my health isn't jumping up and down. And then Dark Veil, this just increases the duration of things like our shade, so that's not bad. Under Siphoning, you definitely want to pick up Catalyst. This gives you 20 extra ultimate every time you use a potion. So you definitely want to use your potions on cooldown to help you get to that ultimate faster. Magic of Flood, we kind of use this on the back bar for Summon Shade. And then Soul Siphoner and Transfer, these are more Magicka Nightblade focus, so you can actually save a couple points there if you want. Now onto weapon abilities, you definitely want to pick up all of your two-handed passives here. This lets you do more damage. This gives us that physical penetration we talked about, reduces the cost. And then Battle Rush is a really good passive too. It gives you 30% stamina recovery after you get a kill. You don't have to get a kill with a 200 ability. You can kill them with your surprise attack, with your ultimate, and you'll still get that 30% stamina recovery buff. It's really good. And then bow as well. Obviously, you'll want all of these bow passives for your back bar. Medium armor, I would definitely recommend picking up all of these, except for the sneak passive, unless you want to incorporate that as part of the build. That's fine. You can do that for sure. Heavy armor, if you are using at least one piece of heavy, you can definitely pick up a couple of these. You'll get extra physical and spell resistance, extra sustain, and then some extra health. In Vampire, you should pick up supernatural recovery as well as undeath. In Fighters Guild, since we are using quite a bit of Fighters Guild abilities, make sure you pick up Intimidating Presence. This is going to reduce the cost of that trap, for example, that we're using on the back bar. Also, Slayer gives us extra weapon damage on both bars. Definitely pick up that. And then Banish the Wicked gives us 9 ultimate if we're fighting undead, Daedra, or werewolves. So that is very good as well. Skill Tracker will let you do more damage on that barb trap also. I'm really not using anything in Alliance War. I'm not even using Vigor on this build. Of course, always pick up your racial passives, and then alchemy, you do at least want medicinal use here for the extra potion duration. And let's take a look at our champion points. Always a very important part of any solo build in ESO. We've got 31 into Warlord, 23 into Sprinter, 37 into Tenacity, 49 Arcanist, 75 into Mooncalf, 31 into Shadow Ward, 23 Tumbling. In the blue tree, 23 into Blessed, 16 into Physical Weapon Expert, 72 into Master at Arms, 37 Thaumaturge, 31 Precise Strikes, 42 Piercing, 49 Mighty. In the red tree, we got 61 into Ironclad, had 2 left over here for Medium Armor, 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 28 into Thick-Skinned, 27 into Recovery, 40 into Bastion. This is going to be, if you're using the Ice Heart set, it will also buff things like a Damage Shield enchant if you happen to be using that on your two-hander. But the nice thing about the Damage Shield enchant and the Ice Heart set is they do get buffed pretty good by the Bastion CP node here. For example, that Ice Heart helm will get up to about a 10k damage shield if you drop 40 points in here. So I definitely recommend this node if you're going to be using either of those item sets. If not, you can just drop these points somewhere else. You could just do more damage reduction or more into healing, whatever you prefer there. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up the Spectral Warrior solo Stam Nightblade build. As usual, if you guys enjoyed the video today, don't forget to crush that like button. It really helps out the channel. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, why the heck not? It is free, and I post videos every week talking about ESO builds, guides, and discussion. I have a few ideas coming up for new videos that I'll be working on soon. But if you have any requests for builds or guides that you'd like to see in the future on the channel, please let me know in the comments section. I do check those out every day and try my best to respond to all of those. Once again, thank you all so much for watching and supporting the channel. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you around in the next video.
perfect.